Hello, everybody. Welcome to our presentation here today. I'm here with Enrique Manzo and Flor
Hi.
Florentevita. They're both here. You can say hello, guys.
Hi, everyone. Thanks,
Um,
Caroline, for this invitation.
yeah, we're excited to be here and to talk to some maybe newer interpreters in the game here and explain to you guys the partnership that ProZ.com, which Enrique and Flora are with, and Boostlingo, which myself I am with, have, so that we're leveraging this relationship as a way to provide sort of a remote interpreter toolkit for interpreters that are maybe just starting out. There's some newer information, some maybe information that's going to be review, but yeah, thanks for joining us. And I'm going to share my screen here so you can see the presentation. Just a moment. Can you guys see it?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great, cool. So this webinar series for which is on Boostlingo, it's called Ideas by Interpreters, and so we do different trainings on the remote interpreter side, so ins and outs of remote interpreting. This is actually not a two-part training, but for now we're just going to be talking to Enrique and Flor, and I want to make clear that everybody in the audience, please feel free to raise your hand if you have a question. I really want this to be interactive and for us to be able to give you guys the information you need or want, or maybe haven't heard yet. So feel free to chime in. So let's start with the basics. What is remote interpreting? It's defined as a telecommunication service that uses devices like web cameras, video phones to provide sign language or spoken language interpreting services, just like a lot of you already do on the platform. So in the case of Boostlingo, we have a network that many of you maybe are already part of. It's called the BPIN, Boostlingo Professional Interpreter Network. And our application, it's a web application. It uses WebRTC, meaning real-time communication, to connect clients and interpreters worldwide every day. It can be done with video, so video remote, VRI, or over the phone, OPI. VRI is becoming more and more popular because it adds that sort of human touch, and also for sign language, of course, you need video. And there's a lot of sign language in the industry, so that aspect of the application is really important. Just I have a few questions here in my slides just to engage you guys a little bit. What do you guys think is the difference between interpreting in a remote setting, so from your home office or a call center, and interpreting on site? How do you think the mentality changes when we're working remotely? And of course, Flora and Enrique, feel free to chime in here as well. If you have a comment or a question, there's a question panel down there as well. What do you guys think, Enrique and Flora, about this question? Like the mentality sort of changing between being remote and being on site.
Well, I think the most important difference between the two is a lack of context that you may have when you work remotely. You know, even if you are doing on-site on an emergency and you don't know what the interpretation is going to be about, you kind of get there and you have an idea of what's happening, who the participants are, and you know what the communicative goals are. But when you do interpreting, you don't have that, and you have to kind of reconstruct it somehow. So
yeah,
yeah.
That's a great point, Enrique. You kind of have to jump into the context, right? Because you're going from assignment to assignment, and with on-site, many times you'll be given more information ahead of time. Whereas remote, you're just kind of, maybe you have an assignment where you need to help a client sign up for a bank account, and then suddenly you're in a courtroom or you're in a hospital. It just varies a lot, so the context it changes quickly. Great, so let's continue here. Just something I like to point out because it's important to think about the differences there, the nuances. I always like to go over best practices with interpreters that are maybe new to remote interpreting and those that are veterans, because it's always good to brush up on HIPAA compliance standards and just best practices in general for using the platform. How do they differ from on-site practices? Well, I always like to kind of iterate that they don't differ too much, the best practices. There's always the technical component because you're using technology to be able to communicate with the client or end user. But in terms of best practices like ethics and code of conduct, you're going to be following a lot of the same protocol. So even as a remote interpreter, standards and practices apply. It's important to remember that even if you're working from your home office, it's really important that you are in a HIPAA compliant space, meaning that you're in a place where you can all the information that is transmitted in the assignment or session is remaining confidential. So if you take notes, you need to shred those afterwards. Any personal health information is at risk, more so when you're doing remote interpreting because it's transmitted via the web. So it's just really important to keep in mind, be in a HIPAA compliant space, meaning, so for example, Enrique, Flor, what does it mean to be in a HIPAA compliant space? What does that look like?
Well, Enrique, do you want to start, or I can start,
Yeah.
and then you can go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead, Flor.
Basically, you have to be in a room that is, isolated from the noise and from everyone in the house. I know it's kind of difficult sometimes, but you have to find it because you have to, be professional and look professional as well. Also, you have to have like a blank background on your behind you. That's precisely because you have to, provide the idea that you are inside that interpretation. You're not at home. They don't need to see you at home, right? And
Right, yeah.
Other than that, well, then of course the connection should be great as well, because that's where the communication is pending on a network. Sorry about that. And what else? Enrique, can you say something else?
Well, we have a technical term there, PHI, or personal health information, and that's a part of HIPAA compliance that's usually overlooked. So, you have, if you're a remote interpreter, you have to take all the measures, all the safeguards to make sure that that information is not revealed in any way. So if there's medical information that can be personally identifiable, sort of saying John Smith was examined by this doctor, and had these symptoms or whatever, you have to make sure that that information cannot be read or accessed by a third party. And that involves, as Caroline said, shredding notes, but also make sure that you have all the safeguards on your device or your laptop or PC to make sure that no one else can see that. So if you took notes about the patient's condition and then your neighbor uses your computer, I know that it's not very common, or your wife or someone else at home uses it and can access that information, well, that's clearly not HIPAA compliant. That's not part of it. Safeguarding PHI, I would say.
Good point. Yeah, especially with the technology aspect, if you're sharing devices or something like that. Yeah, good point. So it's all part of the code of ethics and interpreter best practices, which we have documented in our compliance documentation that any interpreter who's onboarded in our platform has to review and actually sign the document to ensure that they are understand it and following the terms and conditions. So if you're an interpreter in the platform already, then you've seen this. If not, and you're interested, then we will definitely show you. Let's get into kind of the nitty gritty, some of the more like technical aspects of equipment that you might need to be successful as a remote interpreter. Well, number one, of course, a working computer, right? We recommend no equipment that is older than 5 years. Of course, depending on what you're using, Mac or Windows PC, It's going to vary, but we have more detailed documentation on this as well that we give to interpreters when they sign up with the network. Noise canceling headset is recommended, and with microphone also. We discourage kind of the use of computer microphones because of and use of earbud headphones because of the background noise that it allows. And then like Flora mentioned in the previous slide, neutral blank background, so no clutter, no posters, no windows, no animals or dogs or cats running around in the background, and also just a really confidential, so doors shut, clean environment. It really needs to look like you are in a home office, not in a kitchen, not on your sofa, not in the bathroom. And yes, we've seen it all. Trust me. I mention these things because they've seen them happen before. So it may seem really, self-explanatory, but then you will see things happen that you have to reiterate. So, and then internet speed. There's a test we use because our application runs on Twilio. So there's a Twilio network test that we send out to people who are starting up, and we recommend that they test their network every time they log on, just to make sure that they're passing all of the connectivity tests and internet, and that their internet speed and bandwidth is up to par. I always like to go through kind of some no-nos on interpreting remotely, because these do come up. Even though we do train in HIPAA compliance, we tell interpreters to be very careful about where they're answering the call. This is remote interpreting is meant to be something that is convenient for everyone, but with that convenience, it leaves room for a little bit of risk of divulgence of confidential information. So if an interpreter is answering in a coffee shop, that's not considered HIPAA compliant because there's other people around and it's not a confidential space. So no answering in public places. Always dress professionally. We've had people wearing inappropriate clothing before. So just if you're not sure what professional attire means, you can ask your LSC. Normally it means like a button-up shirt or something, a blank t-shirt, something like that. And then with video remote calls especially, and with this platform, we have built-in features that are going to help it be more easy for interpreters to see when it is a video remote call. So sometimes I've heard interpreters tell me, well, I thought it was an audio call. Well, now we have a feature that's being released that's going to show a very obvious flashing, this is video, make sure your background is set up. So if you're answering any call, you want to be prepared, but especially for a video call, you need to be already sitting in front of your computer, background ready, microphone and headset all set up and everything. Because if you answer and the client sees you, getting over to the computer, or you're not even in front of the computer, that's going to look really bad. And we've seen it all happen before. So it's just, and if you're not sure and you want to practice, just get in touch with one of us and we'd be happy to practice with you. We use a formal greeting. So normally it's including your interpreter ID, which is on your interpreter profile right below your name. So, and if you're not sure where to find it, I can help you find that. Hello, my name is Caroline. I'm your Spanish interpreter. ID number 568-4592. How may I help you? That's kind of the mini pre-session that we do with remote assignments here for this network. It's quick and it gets right to the point, but it also gives the information needed to the client. And then, yeah, this is kind of a repetition of what I just said, but always act as if you're in an office. Don't act as if you're sitting on the couch with your pajamas. You want to be sure that the client knows you're being professional. So.
Yeah, that's right. It's often, interpreters have problems understanding that this is not something you're doing casually. This is a professional job, so you have to be dressed accordingly and also have the necessary equipment, like no earbuds but a headset. You know, that's extremely
Right.
important.
Yeah, I think, being at home, it's great, being able to just roll out of bed and put on some clothes and log on and do your work. It's awesome. That's why we built this platform for interpreters, so that they could do that and have this freelance opportunity. But the mentality around keeping it very professional needs to be upheld. So we always like to remind people about that.
Like a tip to be ready. Maybe
Yeah.
you're doing OBI, and when comes a VRI call, maybe you can have like a suit on your chair so you can put it on, and then
Yep.
You don't have to be in suit all around your house. You just do it when you have to do the interpretation. So that's a good tip.
Yeah, exactly. I've had interpreters tell me that they just keep like a little professional looking jacket on the back of their chair.
Exactly.
Put it on if they see a VRI call coming in. So little things like that are really helpful. This slide goes into sort of the differences between the web and mobile app, but I'm going to skip this because we're actually trying to discourage interpreters in the network from using the mobile app, because it just gives us too much risk for answering in public places, and we've seen it happen too often. So I'm going to skip that slide. But here we're going to go into a little bit more detail about HIPAA compliance. So what is HIPAA compliance? What does it stand for? The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. It sets a standard for sensitive patient data protection. Any company that deals with protected health information, PHI, must have physical network and process security and measures in place to follow them to ensure HIPAA compliance. So the answers to these questions are pretty obvious. If you have a cat or dog in the room, are you being HIPAA compliant? Probably not. If you answer a call from a client in a hospital and then tell your husband about the call, are you being HIPAA compliant?
Definitely not.
No. If you answer a call in a private room in which there is no possibility of outside interference, are you being HIPAA compliant?
Well, in that case, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good example of just of a standard HIPAA compliant space. If you answer a call in a bathrobe, are you being HIPAA compliant? Yeah,
This happened before,
no,
right?
It has happened before, unfortunately, but yeah, like I said before, I'm not going to bring up any incident that hasn't happened before, but it has. So just be careful there. Okay, so let's talk a little bit here about web environment. We did go over this a little bit, but be sure to always test your network, and the network test is the Twilio speed test or network test, because that's the interface we use for our platform. So that's the best one to use to ensure that you have the best quality for web environment and highest quality connection. And then, so just some code of ethics and medical compliance, because most of our calls here are medical. I'd say 70% of the calls that go through our platform are medical. We do legal, we do social services, we do all kinds of calls, but these are some of the code of ethics that we uphold, and we have sort of taken some of the pillars from these and made our own code of ethics. But please do check these out and try to keep up to speed with what they're outlining. So the IMIA, the NCIHC, and then the National Standards of Practice, which are CCHI. Take a look at those, and if you have any questions, let us know. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Flor here. And here, Flor, let me make you a presenter so you can take the screen as well.
Okay, it's okay. Oh, okay, good. My screen. There we go. Can you see it?
Yep, there we go. Cool.
Okay. Perfect. Boostlingo, the unified interpretation platform, and ProZ.com, the online community, and Workplace for Language Professionals have made an alliance, as already Caroline says, a partnership, and they become partners to go in line with ProZ's mission, that is to empower interpreters to achieve their business objectives and realize their full potential by providing remote work to our pool of interpreters. Here, well, we will see that ProZ, this is our mission statement. Let me tell you a little bit more about the history of ProZ. It was created by a translator and engineer, which is Henry Dotter, in 1999, and it is maintained right now by a staff of 25 working people from offices in the United States, Argentina, Ukraine, and as well as remotely from locations all around the world. Everything we do in the site has a clear vision and goes hand in hand with the site mission statement, which is to empower language industry professionals to achieve their business objectives and realize their full potential. Sorry, oh, wait a second. And we do this by being committed to our members. Let me go back to our committed to our members, providing access to state-of-the-art tools, educating and inspiring and fostering collaboration among positive, like-minded professionals. As I said, ProZ is the largest community of translators, interpreters, and translation companies all around the world. We have over 1,000 registrars. And ProZ delivers a comprehensive network of essential services, resources, and experiences that enhance the lives of its members. And we enable language professionals to outsource and accept translation and interpreting assignments, collaborate on terms in the Kudos network, evaluate clients with a member-built Bluework, meet face-to-face at local conferences and ProZ powwows, train and be trained in the industry of a specific skills, and of course, much more. Here, as you can see, well, ProZ and Boostlingo. ProZ Interpreters Pool is part of the Boostlingo Professional Interpreter Network. There is a very exhaustive screening process behind every interpreter we onboard on the site, on the platform. The platform we use to manage our interpreters is Boostlingo, of course. And there are some basic requirements that need to be met in order to be finally onboarded and be part of ProZ Interpreters Pool. As you can see, ProZ Pools consist of screened professionals providing a specific service like subtitling or game localizers, interpreting, and more. So you can find more about pools if you go to www.proz.com/pools. Okay, so let's go to more practice here. Want to join? Okay, the screening process to become part of ProZ remote interpreter pool requires you to submit language proficiency certification. C2 is the level, the minimum level that we accept. Hipaa compliance certification available on the on-demand courses at ProZ.com. I will tell you more about that. Proof of experience as a remote or on-site interpreter. And of course, for medical interpreters, proof of experience as a medical interpreter and medical interpreter training certifications. Maybe you're wondering why the Hipaa is so important, because 80% of the calls that we get amount to medical calls, as Caroline already says. That's why we only allow you to get calls if you get the Hipaa compliance, and if you're Hipaa compliant and you have a medical training course done. Other than that, otherwise you can join the platform and be onboarded, but you will not get medical calls. You will get other calls like from business meetings, community centers, educational centers, federal governments, departments, personal kind of stuff. That's why it's so important to be Hipaa. Well, this is the web app for remote interpreting. This is how it looks like. It's very easy to handle. And maybe I can say something here. If you're wondering, we have like a system on ProZ.com, which is called ProZPay. That's the system we use to pay our interpreters. They enter into ProZPay account. You create an account. And ProZ.com gets in advance the money or funds that are available always on the 25th of each month for a standard withdrawal. So every time we onboard you, we give you like an email with all the links for you necessary to fill up that information in order to be ready to get the payments by the end of the month.
Yeah, that's a great feature with ProZ.com interpreters love, because they always get paid on time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very good. Well, that is something that interpreters are really, concerned of. You like working, but you want to be paid. That's
of course, great. Yeah, makes sense.
Good. Well, this is part of the job that I do here on ProZ.com and Boostlingo. That it's called quality assurance. ProZ.com is Boostlingo main backstop, and we are committed to provide clients with the best quality possible. And how can we achieve that? Well, by having extensive high quality measures to select the more capable interpreters. Years of experience are relevant, of course, we ask for that. Training certificates, diplomas, certifications, degrees are all relevant and of course are mandatory. We ask for those in the onboarding part. Reference letters or proof of past experience are also relevant because they count. And
can I just comment real quick here on the credentialing?
Yeah, sure.
So one thing that this kind of network runs into a lot of the time is our main focus here, the clientele we mainly serve are US based right now. I mean, we have clients all over the world, but currently a lot of the standards that our clients require are on the US sort of focus perspective there. That said, we know that interpreters in this network are all over the world, and we like it that way. That's why we created this platform, for everyone to be able to communicate worldwide, right? So, of course, certificates and diplomas, those kind of things, they vary depending on the country you're from or where you've received training. And I just want to assure interpreters that, like Fleur outlines here in the slide, reference letters and proof of past experience are relevant, meaning if you're not sure if your certification course counts, or you're not sure if the training you took in Turkey in 2011 was relevant, just ask us and we'll let you know. We always do this on a case-by-case basis because we're aware that the industry is so global, so it's really hard to know. A lot of times, does this country's certification match up with this country's certification? And we do our own due diligence to make sure that the standards are aligning. So, yeah,
good point. Okay, and that leads me to I think this is my last slide here. Another aspect of my job currently here on Boostlingo ProZ.com is lead talent acquisition. And ProZ.com not only hires qualified interpreters, but also we help them reach their potential, their high standards. Here, it's like needed to participate in pools by offering free training at ProZ.com. One example is the Hipaa compliance course that we have created to allow interpreters to become aware of the Hipaa that is free. Usually they have to pay for that. The interpreters that are on our pool are free to join that Hipaa course. They get their certificate. We uploaded the certificate on the platform, and that's great. And medical training for our interpreters is on the way. Enrique is going to talk about that lately. More specific, but that's what we really want to tell you, that we do not only ask you to be qualified, but also we help you get the qualifications that you need. Also, if you do not have, for example, a language test, we provide you with one, so you can do it, send us to us, and we uploaded it. Also, I ran daily rounds of quality calls with interpreters. Try to, ask you to stick to be compliant to the Hipaa and the Boostlingo Code of Conduct. Our background, appearance, greeting, the way you answer the call, and the call quality are evaluated there on that test code. And that is precisely to be ahead of potential clients' complaints or any issue that client can, come up. And it's good because we are in touch day to day. If you have an issue, you're able to talk to me or Enrique or sometimes Caroline. So it's good to be in touch. You're not alone here, and we are ready to help you get the best of your, business. So I think
Thank you, Flor. This is all really great information. I love that you talked about the medical training, because that's something we need to talk about on the offline just to get going. That's a great idea. And the HIPAA compliance. If you're not HIPAA compliant already, you should talk to these guys and get yourself signed up for a course. So next we have Enrique here with us. Give me a second. I'm going to make him the presenter now. So he can
Right.
share
Talk
his
about
screen
the differences
and...
between on-site versus remote interpreting. I go over this because I've noticed that some new interpreters have lots of questions on how, I mean, if they've done on-site interpreting, if they are really qualified for doing remote, and they found some striking differences between the two, and I've had to explain the differences more than once. So I thought that giving this introduction would be really useful for those getting started with remote interpreting. And also, if you come from the translation industry, which is quite differently, I think this will be very useful for you. So there's a list of differences here on the right. So you have different skills, challenges, the scheduling is different, budget, time, routine, and training. And if you see these two pictures, and right, if I showed you this picture out of nowhere and I asked you, do these two people, the guy on the left with the navy blue jacket and the guy sitting in front of his PC, do they have the same job? Are they both, I know, consultants? Are they both healthcare professionals? You will definitely say no, they have different jobs. So this is what I'm trying to illustrate here. The guy on the left is supposed to be the on-site interpreter, and the guy on the right the remote one. There are striking differences. Well, as you can see, the guy on the right is not HIPAA compliant because there's clearly someone else on the room and he doesn't have a neutral background. So that's just an illustration of what they're supposed to be, not actual interpreters. But yeah, the skills are very different. If you, as I was saying earlier, if you do on-site, you have access to the context of interaction. You are more aware of turn taking. They used to say turn taking means knowing when one person has stopped speaking and passes the floor onto the other person. So you're more aware of that. Also, you need to have, if you do remote interpreting, you need to have more IT skills, knowledge of how the whole technical part works, how to troubleshoot some common issues with your laptop or PC, or maybe with your headset. Scheduling is different. Usually the life of on-site interpreter is that they have these interpreting appointments scheduled in advance, so they just check their when they have this appointment here and there, and they travel to the location and do the interpreting. And it's not usually the case for remote interpreting. Remote interpreters usually have on-demand calls all the time, usually without prior notice. Usually, I mean, in some cases, you may have like 5 to 10 minutes, or if it's a pre-scheduled call, here on Boostlingo, we will let you know in advance, a couple of days in advance. But it's not the most common scenario. It's usually, if you are a remote interpreter, you're taking calls in an on-demand basis. Budgets are different. On-site interpreting is much more expensive than remote interpreting because of course, if you hire an on-site interpreter, you have to pay for that person's travel expenses, usually their food, if the interpretation is going to take a long time. There are so many added expenses, which and by this I don't mean to say at all that I mean they are all equally very quality types of interpretation. They just have different purposes, and on-site is usually much more expensive, and not many people, companies can afford it, as compared with remote interpreting, which is much more affordable because the interpreter has fewer costs, you know. So
Can I
it's
just
more, yeah.
Can I chime in on that point? I think like the main point here with the cost thing, and all of these are really great points, Enrique. Thank you for bringing them up. I love that, you know, remote interpreting, it provides more access to people who may not have had access to language access before. You know, so maybe a remote somebody who's monolingual monolingual Turkish in a very small remote village or town in the US, and they have a heart condition or something like that. Normally they just wouldn't have access to language services, because a lot of times the hospital or the clinic that they're being seen at doesn't have the funds to, or won't commit the funds to get an interpreter out there for them. So it's also very risky. For it's risky when there's not access to language services. So
Exactly.
yeah, qualities are different. Of course, on-site is not going away, but remote interpreting is becoming more popular because it enhances access to language services.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, most part of the interpreting industry is remote interpreting. So, and that's just an example of how technology makes these services more available to us. The same changes can be seen in the translation industry. You know, when you apply technology to production, then production is more accessible to everyone.
Right.
So then, well, the routine is different. As I said, you work in front of a computer. Not you don't travel to a place. It's totally different in that case. And then the training you should receive is also different. And I'm going to talk more about this in detail in the following slides.
Great.
Let's move on. So what is the interpreter role? Well, it's pretty much the same role as an on-site interpreter. So of course you send information across, you transform someone's message into another language, back and forth, you know. So in that sense, it's very similar to the role taken by an on-site interpreter. But then there are other things that that distinguish a remote interpreter from also a machine. I mean, a machine could, you know, convert from one language to the other, and that's it. So you're also providing a human experience. That's very important because you get to understand people's motivations and feelings and needs. And that leads me to the next point. You have to understand and fulfill the client's need. And that's not usually an easy task. It depends on the type of call that you receive. Of course, if you receive a call from, let's say, from some kind of call center and they're trying to sell tickets to a tennis match, that's an interpreter told me about this last week. And it happens that the client need and the goal, it's completely transparent. You know, you just have to make sure that the person gets to buy the tickets for the tennis match. But what if it's something more complex, like a business meeting? Maybe in that case, not even the participants themselves know what's the goal of the meeting. So you have to identify the goal and not just convert the phrases. You know, it's not your task. It's not only, of course, it's very important to convert the meaning exactly as one of the participants as all the participants are intended, you know, to transmit that meaning, especially in medical settings, because it can be very dangerous to not to use the exact terms, the exact terminology, but you also need to pay attention to the goals, because if you're interpreting in a medical setting and you're using all this medical terminology and you're converting the message exactly as the doctor is saying it, well, maybe you're not helping. I mean, you're helping, you're doing a great job as an interpreter, but you have to do more, because you have to help the patient understand what they need to do, what the other steps are. And this is especially important when it comes to different cultures, So imagine, maybe some of you are from Southeast Asia or East Africa, and maybe you do know that the culture in North America is completely different, or it's at least very different, and communication is not the same in both countries. So if you only communicate the message verbatim, you're doing a very important part of your job. Surely I'm sure that you're doing that great, but you also need to think in terms of the goals and in terms of helping the people involved.
Yeah,
So,
that's a good point. That just taking into, sorry to interrupt you, taking into you're advocating for the clients, so you're the person who's able to transmit what they're trying to accomplish in the session. Yeah, great point.
Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, there are different areas of specialization. I just mentioned a few: customer service, medical, but you have more. In Boostlingo, we have 3 specializations. I mean, it's divided like this: medical, legal, and court interpreting, for which you need to have a specific set of credentials, training, and experience. And then general calls, which are accessible to the rest of interpreters who don't have these very specific credentials. I will talk more about this in a minute, but essentially medical calls, as Caroline said, represent 70% of the call flow. So this is a very good area to specialize in. Then overall in the industry, the public sector also takes a very big part of the pie in terms of call flow. And well, I would say that in general, in the whole industry, these are the two main areas. So just to give you an idea, if you give me a minute, here I have, this is a picture taken from the NIMSI site. It's a it's a very well-known organization which makes market studies. So these are the areas, the main areas of specialization in the language industry. So as you can see, immigration, justice system, government, defense, these are all public sector. These are public sector areas, and then you have healthcare, which can be either public sector or private sector.
That's a great resource. It's NIMSI, you said?
NIMSI. It's
Cool. Okay.
a Russian organization. Yeah, you may check it, nimsi.com.
Cool.
Then
yeah,
I will show
everyone check this out. It's great information.
Also, this is another picture taken from their site. This shows the number of top interpreting providers by country. And as you can see, the US, Canada, the UK, and then Australia are all part of these of the picture, with the US having 27 out of the, well, I think it's 40 or 50 top interpreting providers. So yeah, the US market is the biggest one, and then you have Canada, UK, and Australia, all English-speaking countries. So if you provide services in, I don't know, Swahili into Croatian, well, you may find yourself that you don't have much market to sell your services in. But and that's the reason why most interpreters do their native language and English, or English and another language. In that case, Swahili into English, and then Croatian into English. There's a big market for that. Other countries are Finland, Sweden, Germany, Luxembourg, Belgium, but they all actually work with English.
Yeah,
It
so
might
I
not.
think that's a good point, is that a lot of those Nordic countries, it's English into another language because they most of them speak English there too. It's a good
Yeah,
point.
absolutely. But there's for example, in Sweden, there's lots of immigration from Northern Africa, so
Mhm.
Sweden has become a hotspot for interpretation industry companies. So there are lots of jobs there, whether it's remote and on-site, and it's usually in combination with English. Note
Mhm.
that China doesn't appear in this drawing. And it's the second largest economy. So that tells us a lot about how English kind of dominates the interpretation industry in a way.
Yeah, interesting.
Mhm. So training. So that's it. You have the equipment. You have basic training, and you really want to market yourself to start working as a remote interpreter. So language training, there are different English language proficiency certifications, like the TOEFL exam, Cambridge examinations. There are lots everywhere. You have the English Education First standard English test. There are a lot of tests that you can take to certify your English level, and also then you have English exams that are English for specific purposes, like English for the medical field or legal English. You can take the training in those areas and get certified. That's really important, especially to become part of the ProZ.com remote interpreter pool. I don't want to take more minutes. I'm extending myself, I guess, a bit.
That's
but
okay.
there are more specific interpretation training that you can take, more other courses. Most of them, well, all of the ones that are mentioned here are online. They're usually not very expensive, and you should consider them as an investment. These are 40 to 60 hour interpreter courses. You have the Bridging the Gap course, which is the most popular, the most known course, I would say. The auto course, this is a 40-hour training as well. Then there's a site called Medical Interpreter Training School. This has bundles. You can buy each course separately, and cumulatively they add up to 60 hours of training and more, 80 hours in some cases. Masterword, that's another place. And then you have ProZ.com, the ProZ.com training platform. You have several courses on the platform, which will help you become proficient at interpreting. You can check the ProZ.com training platform from the navigation bar at ProZ.com. So is language proficiency enough, for being an interpreter? Well, I don't think so, because, and you can see here the Elvis picture here dancing, because just like being able to walk doesn't mean you can dance. Knowing two languages doesn't mean you can interpret.
Exactly. Good point.
I think I'm kind of proficient in English at some point, but I'm no way capable of interpreting. I just can't do it, and that's because I studied to be a translator, not an interpreter, and I personally don't have that training. But some of the required skills, if you really want to make your way in the interpreting world, well, take interpretation training. This means theory and practice in interpreting. Note taking, this is very very important. Note taking, there are different techniques. You just don't copy everything one of the participants say. There are different techniques on how to take notes. There are trainings, very good trainings actually on ProZ.com about this. There are different ways. This very specific information that you need to note down, not everything. You need to be trained in sight interpreting. This is for VRI only, for video remote interpreting. Right, I don't see how you can do sight interpreting with OPI. I don't guess, unless someone sends a text on the chat box. But in any case, imagine a doctor showing you some kind of report instead of reading it, and then you have to do site interpreting, or if it's legal, someone showing you some kind of certification that you need to interpret.
Just a quick comment, Enrique, just from the audience. I wanted to mention this training program that is also really good out there, called the Community Interpreter, TCI. It's on it's with Cross Cultural Communications, and they provide a really great training that's 40 hours, also similar to Virginia Gap. So if you guys want information on that, I can send it to you, but it's just the communityinterpreter.com.
Excellent. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for bringing it up. Yeah, great. Well, of course, you need to be good at analyzing information and summarizing in some cases without skipping any important term or any important piece of information. So you have to be very good critical thinking in this case. And then you need to have very good background knowledge and specialized knowledge. Of course, if you're doing medical interpreting, you need to be, or any specialist type of interpretation, you need to have specialist knowledge. But some people often overlook the background knowledge that you need to have, right? To understand the situation, to understand some more general content. So it's background knowledge is also very important. And well, I had this testimonial from one of our Spanish interpreters, Leonardo de ProZ, and he works freelance. You can also, some VRI interpreters work in-house. The ones we have on the interpreter pool work freelance. And well, he says, one of the things he says is that in my opinion, this is an amazing job. It's very exciting because you never know beforehand what sort of situation you'll be interpreting. This is kind of what we were saying before, and it's really rewarding to help people communicate.
Yeah, you're kind of like it's kind of like you're transported to different places from your own home. It's like both virtual intelligence or virtual reality.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And you're moving from one scenario to the other, so it's a very exciting job. Yeah, we're receiving, it's not always visible, but we'll receive very good feedback from our interpreters.
Good, that's good to know.
And that's about it. I just wanted to mention that to be a remote interpreter, you should definitely think of getting certified in privacy and security standards. Hipaa is a word you're going to hear a lot, and you've heard it like 10 times already in this webinar. It's a Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Yeah, because I mean, it's the base.
It's the big name.
Knowing how to. Yeah.
It's the big name in privacy and security standards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but here we have other norms or other laws. The Affordable Care Act. This is also very important. It's like basically it's about providing services to anyone regardless of their disabilities, nationality, sexual orientation, race, and all that. And there are other privacy and security standards like the ones mentioned here, which are worth looking into, and they will definitely be very valuable for any employer anywhere.
Great.
And well, that's about it.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much, Enrique and Flor. I'm just gonna show a couple last things. We have a couple minutes, and guys, if you have questions there in the audience, please write them down in the question panel, and we'll get to them as we go. So I wanted to announce a couple things that a lot of you maybe already know about, but we have a blog, so boostlingo.com/blog that provides a lot of industry knowledge and share stories that are shared from interpreters just like you that provide tips and tricks, that kind of thing. We do these monthly webinars. They're free for everybody, and everybody's welcome to join. I'm always looking for feedback from interpreters that are on the platform, are doing remote interpreting, on what kind of topics they want to hear about, what would be useful to them. trainings, that kind of thing. Connect with me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is here on the screen. You can see it. And then we also just created a Facebook group for interpreters. So this we've created to have a better form of engagement with our interpreters, so people can comment and share feedback. So check us out if you haven't already, and join the group. And I will look at and see if there are any questions here. Quick. Let's see. Will this PowerPoint be shared with us in email? Yes. Anybody who has registered for this, we usually send out a recording of the video of the webinar, and then we can also share the PowerPoint too. IP address blocked during registration. I wonder. Pierre said this. He's an interpreter. I'm not sure where you are located. In terms
Is
of
that Pierre Wilders?
No, Pierre
else?
van
Okay.
Slot. So Pierre, he's in Luxembourg, he says.
Oh, okay.
I don't know why your IP address would be blocked in Luxembourg. I mean, I know we've had issues in China, but maybe you can talk to Enrique or Flora about that, because it's with the ProZ.com site. Their information is going to be provided here too, so you can contact them. Share details for taking the Hipaa course. Yeah, also that would be great. Enrique, Flora, maybe you guys can send me the details on that, and I can send it out in the follow-up email of this webinar.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great.
Sure.
Okay. Great, guys. Well, thank you again, Flora and Enrique.